You said this place was steps from the water.
We just haven't found the steps yet.
How much did we save?
Enough.
Enough to get lost?
Or you could book a stay with Hilton.
Welcome to your oceanfront room, just steps from the water.
The Hilton sale is on now. Book on Hilton.com or the Hilton app and save up to 20% to get the stay you expected. When you want savings, not surprises, it matters where you stay. Hilton, for the stay.
Ready to soundtrack your summer? With Red Bull Summer All Day Play, you choose a playlist that fits your summer vibe the best. Are you a festival fanatic, a deep end DJ, a road dog, or a trail mixer? Just add a song to your chosen playlist and put your summer on track. Red Bull Summer All Day Play. Red Bull gives you wings. Visit redbull.com/brightsummer ahead to learn more. See you this summer.
Welcome to The Hypnotist, the show that gives you inside access to cutting-edge hypnosis with real clients facing genuine issues. Brought to you by the hypnotherapist demanded by celebrities, CEOs, and even royalty, Adam Cox. These recordings took place live from Adam's clinic in London's world-famous Harley Street. So, get yourself comfortable and enjoy today's episode of The Hypnotist.
Hi, it's Adam here, and you're about to watch or listen to the very first free session Friday. And this is an idea that I had a few weeks ago around the time of my birthday, and I thought it would be useful to actually show a full session rather than just the hypnotherapy bit that you hear me do, which is normally the final 25 minutes of a hypnotherapy session. Now, that led to an issue because everything that I do is completely confidential. So how could I share the client and what I do with the client if it's all confidential? And that's where the idea of Free Session Friday came from, because I thought, what if I offered a free session for those people that are quite happy to relinquish that confidentiality and to share the whole experience of them working with me? So the very first volunteer that I had is a gentleman called James, who is a firefighter. And you'll hear his story that he had certain anger triggers that would lead him to lose the plot or explode in certain situations. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to share the full session as it actually was, not heavily edited, not picking out the bits that are most interesting, but you actually get to experience the whole session like you're a fly on the wall watching me do hypnotherapy with someone else. So you're going to get to know James and what it's cost him, what he's tried, where it came from. And then you're actually going to observe the first part of a hypnotherapy session, which is the bit where I'm in detective mode, diagnosis mode. I'm asking lots of questions to figure out where it came from. Are there any belief systems connected to it? Is there an unconscious strategy or certain triggers that are happening here? Are there any role models or resource states that we can use? So you're going to hear me gather lots and lots of information in the first part. And the second part, you're actually going to hear the very hypnotherapy I did with James live. So when you listen to a normal episode, you're listening to the final bit of a hypnosis session, and this is the entire thing. Now, what I would encourage you to do is to think about what you can take from this as an observer. There might be certain things that trigger you that aren't anger related that are still beneficial. But what I would also really like is more volunteers. I've got around about 10 volunteers so far that have requested, but not every issue is something that's going to work well for one of these live broadcasted sessions, these actual recordings that are going to go out. So I'm really looking for people with an interesting or unusual issue. If it's something that seems very unusual, so if you just said, I want to quit smoking, you're probably not going to get chosen for Free Session Friday because that's quite a common thing. If it's unique, if it's different, or if it's having a really big impact on your life, I would love you to volunteer for a future Free Session Friday. And what you would get is an entirely free hypnotherapy session with me. And the only caveat is that it will be shared. So as long as you're okay with that, there is an application process where you fill out a form and do some recordings. And if you're okay with that, there's going to be a link in the show notes to take you to the page for Free Session Friday. And to give you an idea, for paying clients, they would normally pay £499 or actually $699 for that 90-minute session. And you would get that completely free if you are chosen, like James was, to be a volunteer for Free Session Friday. So I'm going to sit back and just allow you to watch the entire thing. But if you do want to volunteer for a future free session, or maybe you would like to nominate someone, maybe there's someone that you know that would be an excellent candidate for Free Session Friday, in which case, instead of you filling out the form for them, share the link with them so they can kind of apply for themselves. That would be greatly appreciated. But for now, find a quiet, comfortable place. The first half is you observing the diagnostic part. The second part is the actual hypnotherapy itself. And let me know in the comments or drop me an email. I'll put my email address in there. It's adam@adamcox.co.uk. If you like this format of seeing more of what happens in the session, or if you would continue just to hear or see the actual hypnotherapy bit and not get to find out about the client issue beforehand, feedback is really, really appreciated. But if you guys like this, either volunteer or just let me know and I will keep doing them. And my plan is to do one free session each week for either someone with something interesting, unusual, or just to help someone that is really in need. So if that's relevant for you or you know someone, definitely have a look in the show notes. For now, take care and enjoy the session. James, lovely to connect with you here. And obviously we've got our very first Free Session Friday, which is a thought that popped into my head a few weeks ago. And I thought a lot of people hear my stuff, but they don't actually know what happens before the hypnosis part. And I thought, good for people to kind of see behind the curtain and kind of how it works. So what are we going to be working on today? What's the issue that you want hypnotherapy for?
So the main thing really for me is controlling anger. In general, I'm not an angry person. I've not got, it's not something that's a huge problem. But when it does happen, it's just a case of I kind of, lose control, I suppose, and it's not very helpful, certainly in, relationship settings at home. And it's quite rare, but when it does happen, it's an issue that's been there over the years and something that I've recognised that I need to work on. And I've been been doing various things, reading various books, listening to some of your podcasts, doing a bit of meditation, things like that. And I just thought this would be a good opportunity to try something out to see if it can help.
Yeah. So anger is one of those things that it gets a lot of judgment, I would say, from the world in general. A lot of people have this idea that there's good and bad emotions. My perspective is that every single emotion is useful in the right context. So if we think of an extreme version of anger, which we might say rage, if someone was trying to kidnap my children, I think rage would be a very useful emotion to kind of feel in that particular moment, for example. So there's no good or bad. A really useful frame to think about emotions is it useful or not? And if it's useful, keep it. And I would say that I've worked with some people that they're at their most productive when they're angry. If they've got some kind of imaginary enemy out there and they can get really furious, they get into a state of absolute intense productivity. Great. If it produces a lot of cortisol in the blood, but if it's useful for them, who cares? No one's getting hurt. Where anger might not be useful is if people do get hurt, either physically or emotionally, or it can cause damage. So again, I have no judgment when it comes to addictions. If people want to gamble, they can gamble. But if the gambling then means that people can't pay their rent or their mortgage, or there's a lot of stress in the household because you've got bailiffs knocking at the door, then the gambling might not be useful, if that makes sense. So if we look at it through that lens of utility, what are the consequences of you getting angry in the way that you get angry?
Okay, so yeah, I mean, in general, I'm really laid back and not much bothers me at all. So I would say it takes quite a lot, but actually it takes quite a little in the right circumstance. So, the circumstances generally, if I feel like I'm being unfairly treated, or I'm being smothered or stopped from doing something that I want to do, or maybe not trusted. I'm a very trusting person. So if I feel there's a lack of trust, or maybe a mixture of all those things, and the way it will erupt is, I'll probably sort of take it, whatever it is that's happening, I'll kind of just be fine. I'll be fine. And then it's like a flick switches, and it's kind of like, right, I can't be bothered with this anymore. And it's verbal, I'll shout. I'm quite a loud person, but for some reason when I get angry, I shout. I'm quite tall. So for anyone, whether it's kids or the other half or whatever it is, if I lose my temper, then it's probably quite threatening for people around. Well, it is quite threatening for people around me. And I can be really nasty with what I say. So it causes damage. And then basically once I'm in that frame of mind, I don't know, I mean, I can calm down quite quickly if I'm removed from the situation, probably. But if it's not possible, then yeah, you're in a bit of a, you're not thinking like an adult, probably. You're kind of in child mode and almost having a bit of a tantrum. I would describe it as. So, it's not a huge problem in my day-to-day life, but when it happens, the way that I react is basically not, in my mind, it's not acceptable. And I think the things that I'm angry about are probably, I'm sort of justified to be maybe angry about the things, but the way that I'm reacting is not justified. So that's kind of what I want to change.
Yeah. And I'll say that's a really important distinction, because what you can say is that there's a difference between intention and execution. And I would say what I'm getting from this is that if the key triggers are you're not being trusted, or things seem unfair, or you're confined in some way, then effectively there is a counter to that, which is effectively an element of dealing with boundaries. You're saying, I want to have freedom, I want to have this, or this is hypocritical, therefore I'm doing this because it's fair. That intention is actually a valid intention. So the intention could be something that we can say, right, let's keep the intention that you wouldn't want to be in a relationship that is unfair, where you're not trusted, where you can't actually live life in the way that you want to do. But equally, the execution element of that, if it reaches a breaking point where, the straw breaks the camel's back, the switch gets flipped, you get into that tantrum or kind of seeing red element, then what we can say is that even if the intention is valid, the fallout of that is bad for you and bad for the people closest to you. Just so I can get a sense of the environments, because some people would say, right, it doesn't have to be someone close. It could be if someone cuts them up in traffic, or someone gives them a look on the street, that can flip their switch. Are there any kind of particular triggers that tend to be more prevalent with you, that tend to set you off, and areas that should but don't, like the exception to the rule?
Yeah, basically nothing that you would think would make me angry in terms of, like you say, the sort of road rage. Nothing really bothers me. It's definitely on a personal level. It's when someone, I've done quite a lot of thinking about it and stuff. And I think growing up, I was the youngest of 4 kids, and I've always been a bit of a people pleaser. And I think that there's an element, so if I'm a very honest person, if I feel that I'm not done anything wrong and someone's sort of accusing me, or they're maybe not accusing me, they're maybe just saying something I can feel like it's an accusation. It's that kind of environment. And it's only in very close personal relationships. So it's only ever happened, probably with my kids, probably when I was younger with brothers and sisters a little bit, but they've not got such an influence over stopping you doing things. So maybe a bit with parents as well. Maybe, if I was told I wasn't allowed to do stuff at a set, maybe when I was a young, a teenager, young adult, I was a bit sort of wouldn't take well to that. And certainly in relations, so throughout my adult life and relationships, it's been when I feel that I'm getting possibly stopped from doing something, or like I say, being accused of doing something wrong. It's maybe not even an accusation, but I maybe take it as an accusation, and I don't react very well to it because I'm not trying to do anything wrong.
Expedia and Visit Scotland invite you to come experience the beauty that awaits in Scotland. The sweep of wild coastlines, quiet lochs, and untamed landscapes. Fresh cuisine that feels rooted in the land. Come experience the kind of stillness that stays with you long after you leave. Plan your Scottish escape today at expedia.com/Visit Scotland.
So good, so good, so good.
Everything you want for summer is at Nordstrom Rack stores now, and up to 60% off. Stock up and save on the brands you love like Vince, Sam Edelman, Frame, and Free People. Join the Nordy Club to unlock exclusive discounts, shop new arrivals first, and more. Plus, buy online and pick up at your favorite Rack store for free. Great brands, great prices. That's why you Rack.
Yeah. Does talking about the times when it's happened give you an element of a trigger of when it actually happened? Like it might be an echo to some extent, but not as intense. But can you get to that place where you can start getting riled up just thinking about some of the things that have happened in the past?
Yeah, probably. It can piss me off a bit, and yeah. I suppose a big part of me is like, I shouldn't be putting up with whatever it is that I'm getting angry about with. So I don't know if I'm almost angry with myself because I'm sort of repeating patterns of things that have happened in the past. So it's kind of like more, I'm angry with the person or the situation, but I'm maybe angry with myself because I'm like, well, why am I letting myself be in this situation? I don't know. But
yeah. If that was true, it would feel initially like frustration first, rather than anger. And frustration can bubble into anger, but frustration is, why is it happening like this? Is tend to be the link to frustration. Anger is, this isn't okay. Like some kind of standard or rule has been violated. And what I'm getting a sense from you is that it's a combination of both.
Yeah.
That actually some of the things, like you're frustrated that things are happening the way that you don't want them to happen, but then the anger comes when some kind of line is crossed. You may not even know exactly what that line is. You just know when it has been crossed, because then that's when the switch is flipped and you're feeling that. And what physical things do you notice in, let's say, because I can see you're not angry now. You're kind of in a very kind of calm, relaxed state. It might be a little bit of nerves because we're kind of recording. But what would be the changes happening in your body if you were getting close to the line but not crossing it?
I think you're definitely, I've always sort of said it just happens. It's like flicking a switch. But then when you stop and think about it, I think your point there about frustration it's very much, it's frustration to a point, and then I'm just like, right, I've had enough of this. So, it might be, let's say if it was when my daughter was younger and there was something and she just, you kept asking the same thing or whatever, and and then eventually you flip, and usually that's mixed with various other stresses going on around you. But certainly in the situations that I can think of, it'll be, I'm maybe being asked something and I'm maybe, given an answer. That answer isn't believed, so I sort of say it again. It isn't believed, so and it's basically I keep getting the same question or whatever it is, and I get to a point where I'm like, right, I've had enough of this, and it definitely explodes. And I suppose you probably do feel kind of, or without thinking about it, you maybe don't notice it, but maybe a bit of a tightening of the chest and sort of rising temperature and maybe getting a bit of a dry mouth, that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. And are there any phrases that you would use? Some people following that pathway would say, I'm losing my patience now, or I'm reaching the end of my tether. Do you have any kind of phrases that kind of link to this idea of, in the run up to flipping that switch, you're communicating or feeling something?
Not real, not that we've kind of put in place or anything, to try and help, I suppose. But I will make it clear that, I don't know why I keep needing to repeat myself, or something along those lines. If it's that kind, so I will say it won't just be that I'll just sit there silently and then all of a sudden, I will kind of give a warning that I'm not enjoying this, and if it carries on, I'm gonna lose the plot. But like I say, losing the plot bit's not helpful.
And generally, you do that through tonality or body language, or a combination of both?
Probably a bit both. Yeah.
So if I'm you, and let's just say, who's your favorite method actor? For me, I would say, there's some actors that really kind of immerse themselves into the. Daniel Day-Lewis is the one that pops into my mind. So if I'm being a method actor and I'm being you, what would I have to do? What would my mannerisms be to kind of let other people know that I'm not enjoying this? Like, we're getting close now.
It'd probably be a look, it'd be a bit of a look, and I don't know. I would just be like, kind of sort of saying enough's enough. I probably will, actually. I've not got the best memory, so a lot of the time my recollection of things isn't great either. But I probably will quite often say, right, I'm about to lose the plot if you don't start, if this continues or whatever.
Yeah.
But that probably is a warning that I will, I'll sort of say, look, I'm going to lose the plot here.
Yeah. So in that case, the plot is you being reasonable. And when you lose the plot, you're then unreasonable. And then that gives you permission to shout, yell, cause damage with your words, effectively lose your temper at that particular point. Has it ever worked out well for you, even if it was when you were younger, a teenager, where you crossed the line and actually you were positively rewarded for being aggressive in that way?
Probably not worked out well, but there's one time that really sort of sticks in my mind that I was cutting the grass for, like, where we lived. We had a big garden and had one of these sit-on lawnmowers. I was out cutting the grass. I was about 17 or 18, and I changed the petrol cap, and it had fallen. As I was going along, the petrol cap had sort of vibrated, fallen off, and I'd gone over it and destroyed it, basically. And this was just as my dad had shown up, and I think he'd been away with work for a week or something. So it was the first time I'd seen him. I'm out cutting the grass. He came over, and my dad definitely, when we were younger, he would lose the plot. So there's definitely some learned behaviours there, I think. But he did lose the plot with me about it, and I didn't even realise it had happened, really. So again, there's that whole sort of unfairly treat, because I think I had headphones on or something. I was listening to music, wasn't even aware. Next thing, I turn around, Dad's shouting at me, turn off the light, and he goes mental because I've ruined this bloody petrol cap. And that, I kind of lost it at that point. And I stood up probably for the first time and, almost squared up to him. And I think my sister had to kind of jump between the two of us. And it didn't really come to anything. And I've got a really good relationship with my dad. But that is something that sort of, I suppose. And also, actually, when I was about 7 or 8, my brother was really winding me up and just calling me stupid names. Lost the plot, chased him. He ran into the bathroom, hid behind the door, and he was still calling me the names. And I was going absolutely mental and put my foot through the door. And then we both sort of ran away upstairs and hid under the bed. So it's been there from a very young age. I can do, if it's something that I feel sort of keep happening, I'll just lose it. And then, I'm never, apart from that time when I put my foot through the door, I've never actually been violent, but I certainly could be threatening, swearing, shouting, all that stuff.
Yeah. So what we can say, and the reason I asked that question about, has it ever worked out well for you, is that it doesn't take a lot for the brain to think, oh, this works.
So I didn't really answer that question, I suppose, because I kind of got into it. But I think the reason I would maybe associate that with working out well the situation with my dad is that I kind of stood up to him, and I didn't really resolve anything, but I maybe had a feeling that he maybe took notice that I'm not going to, just sit back and, so there's maybe something in that.
Yeah. And I mean, if you think of aggression in the animal kingdom, they don't call it aggression, they call it dominance. And effectively, the animals that never stick up for themselves get dominated by other animals, and it's not a good situation, kind of for them. Humans are animals. We have that kind of inclination. So there is that element of sticking up for yourself, making sure that you're not, unfairly treated. Anger has that function. If you were to think back to that moment of your dad getting angry at you for something that you didn't intend to do, it was clearly accidental that you caused the damage to the petrol cap. Is there a way back then that would have actually worked? Could you have had a reasonable conversation while he's yelling at you, or do you need to raise your voice to kind of fight fire with fire in that particular moment?
Yeah. I mean, I think probably if I hadn't responded, he would have just, had his rant, and that would have been that, really, nobody would have been affected. I might have been a bit fed up, and I'm sure he would have been fed up and probably, but in the same way that I'm here, you're disappointed in yourself when you've done it, because after it all, when everything's calmed down, you're like, well, that was completely unnecessary. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think to stop him, probably shouting back was probably the only, or standing up and sort of facing up to him probably was the only way to stop that. But
yeah. So how most people learn what on the surface looks like self-sabotaging behavior is that there was a time and a place where it was useful or necessary in that specific context. And if you've got older brothers, if you've got quite a dominant father figure that is used to kind of shouting, then actually the options that are available to you now as an adult weren't really available to you as a child. You kind of pretty much had to shout and had to kind of get aggressive. Otherwise, you'd have been trampled all over, if that makes sense. And because you were rewarded back then, the brain then forms a neural pathway, and it's like, oh, this works. If I'm being unfairly treated, if I'm being confined, this option works, and it becomes automatic. And a lot of human behavior is automatic. You rarely think about tying your shoelaces. You just know how to do it automatically. I'm sure you can drive a car, without really thinking about changing gear, changing lanes. Like, your brain can do things completely on autopilot. It can definitely get angry on autopilot. And the problem is that it never really learned a much better alternative, because it's almost kind of like the brain, if it figures something that works, it will automate it quite quickly and then move on to other stuff that it can automate. And actually, there was a lack of nuance back then. When you're 7, 8, 9 years old, you're not sitting there with a pen and a pad thinking, oh, how many different options do I have to deal with being unfairly treated? Like, nobody does that. You kind of, you look at people around you. If you've got older brothers and they raise their voice, and you've got a father and they raise their voice, like, okay, this is what you do to do that. In the same way that the language that most people speak as their first language, you don't learn it in a classroom. You just learn it by picking up, what people say around you. Like, that's how you kind of acquire that. So what you've got is a neural pathway that has a very good intention. It says, right, if you're being unfairly treated, if you're being restricted, if there's an element of hypocrisy or whatever it might be, this is your go-to default way of dealing with that. But you're not doing it immediately. You're kind of giving clues that you're about to lose the plot before you do it. But other people don't look at that as kind of like, oh, okay, right, there's that look, there's that tone of voice, there's that facial expression. I'm going to suddenly do that. What can happen in a lot of relationship dynamics is that in the same way that you've got your patterns, it's highly likely the people closest to you have their patterns, and they kind of know what buttons to push. again, unconsciously. So actually you start getting impatient, and it might be actually at that point, there's kind of like a rolling of the eyes. And then that's kind of like, right, that's putting petrol on the fire. And then you're feeling even more. And it can get to that place pretty quick, if that makes sense. What we can say, though, is that what may have been really useful for you as a 7-year-old, as a 13-year-old, as a 16-year-old, might not be that useful as a full-grown adult, particularly if you're a big guy. Because you raising your voice, which was completely okay as an 8-year-old, actually might lead to, people feeling unsafe around you, particularly if they're your children, if that makes sense. So what we can say is that the utility isn't there anymore. And most people in whatever line of work that you're in has a reference point of a tool that used to work really, really well. And then new technology comes along, there's better tools, and then nobody uses that old tool anymore. It becomes a bit of a relic. Is there a reference point for you of something like that used to use it all the time, but then actually something better came along and you just never used the old thing?
Well, just in everyday sort of life.
Yeah, or it could be a niche thing in your profession, or it could be just like a general, like, for example, like there was a time that, I've worked in an office most of my life that people would communicate through fax machines. Nobody does that. Or before Netflix and DVDs, like the old VHS, kind of tapes, there was a time that everyone used them and now nobody uses them. Is there a reference point like that resonates with you, that used to use it a lot because it worked, now it doesn't work because there's just something better?
Yeah, I mean, probably, I suppose if I think about it, maybe music or something, and that exact same, it used to be a tape or a CD or a record or whatever, and now it's just an online thing, so it's not a physical, because I listen to quite a lot of music, so maybe it's something along those lines.
Yeah, like there was a time when everyone had CDs, or I've still got, do you remember those old kind of like cassette tapes that you could like record stuff off the radio and things like that? Like nobody would dream of doing that now. But there's certain things that were quite useful, and then they're not anymore. Checkbooks is another example. There was a time that people used to pay with checks, and nobody would dream of doing that now. That's how we want to start looking at the kind of the anger, is that it had its time, and that time was when you had very little resources and options and choices, and raising your voice and getting aggressive is kind of the perfect thing if you've got, an inability to sit down and actually communicate. But I think the dynamics are different now, and I think that actually there would be a much more useful tool for you to meet every intention that you have. So if someone's being unfair, I think you could articulate that. And here's what I have a feeling is that you probably are articulating that, and it's not being validated or understood, which is how it gets to the point of anger. I don't think it's your first recourse, but we're still getting to that place. You're still using the checkbook. You're still using the CD player. So we need a better alternative to that. So to what extent would you say that you do use communication before you lose the plot?
I mean, I think I do, but yeah, it's sort of almost, by the time I've communicated it, it's almost too late. I'm sort of communicating, saying I'm about to lose the plot, and then literally the next thing that's said, I'll probably explode. And I mean, that probably does take me back to childhood, because I think, as the youngest of 4, certainly my big brother, he was really annoying. So he would keep going until you lost that was his aim. And it did generally take quite a lot with me. But when I did, I absolutely lost it, and he would know all about it. So, that's probably, again, just having this conversation, a big part of, I've got this kind of threshold, and then once it's broken, that's it.
Yeah. And each time you pass the threshold, it also then, as undesirable as it is, it becomes something that has been done. And has that ever led to the very outcome that you want? So if you're feeling confined and then you get aggressive, do you then get the payoff of going off and doing what you want, or you feel you're being unfairly treated? Then you're rewarded with fairness. Is there a benefit to the aggression?
Again, not the best memory, but I remember a time at school, I just started at a new sort of high school, and came along with the blazer on and everything, and was in a classroom. It was quite a sort of rowdy classroom with a lot of sort of badly behaved kids, and we were from a little village outside the town, so we were seen as sort of probably an easy target. And this kid came up to me and started pouring a can of Coke over my head. And my initial reaction was just anger, and I just basically stuck the head on him, and he never did it again, and nobody else did. But not that I'm usually violent, but it's like in that situation, it was like, well, I'm not going to let this kid bully me, kind of thing. But it was a sort of instant reaction. So there's definitely been situations where I've stuck up for myself almost, and it has had a benefit. And I suppose if I go back to it, I do often feel that my anger is justified in situations, but it's going between maybe your anger's justified, but the reaction isn't justified. You need to deal with it in a different way.
Yeah. Is there someone that that you think if they were in your exact same situation with the same level of unfairness or confinement or lack of trust or lack of belief, that they would handle it in a way that you think would be, one, have less fallout, people don't feel kind of upset or anxious or scared, and it would actually lead to more of the very intention that you do want, which is more fairness, more trust, more freedom, whatever the catalyst might be?
Yeah, probably my twin sister. She would probably react in the opposite way. I mean, she's certainly growing up, she did have a bit of a temper about her, but certainly now, she would react in a very different way, I think.
How would she react?
Very calm, and she would communicate much better than I do, I suppose. She's quite a good sort of mediator, and it'd be a sort of calm, more measured approach.
Yeah. And do you have any references or evidence that your twin sister, by communicating and mediating in that way, actually not only doesn't have the downside, but actually does have the upside, that actually people understand her perspective, that actually it leads to some kind of resolution?
Yeah, I mean, it probably, in terms of stuff that I've been around and seen, because obviously you're not there for every fallout she's ever had, so I don't know if 100% how she would react, maybe if she was having an argument with her husband or whatever, but I've seen the way she deals with her kids. And, I suppose when I compare it to my daughter, who's now an adult, but she was a really good kid, she didn't really ever put a foot wrong. And I didn't really have many times where I had to lose the plot with her, but when I did, I did. My sister, on the other hand, has 2 kids, and one of them is certainly, he's great, but he can push the buttons, I know that if he was mine, there'd be a lot more, so sometimes you think, God, she's too soft on him, but actually she's just got a much better approach of, she'll talk him down, and I think, when his dad is starting to get really annoyed, she'll be the mediator again. And sometimes I look at it and think, is it a bit of a sort of, just letting him off with stuff and he's not really learning? But actually, she'll probably diffuse the situation and then speak to him later when, people are calm or whatever. And so I've definitely got quite a few examples of where I've seen him doing stuff that I'm thinking, if he was mine, he'd know all about it. She's maybe dealt with it. And I maybe don't look at it and think, oh, that's the best way of dealing. But actually, when you take a step back and think about it, it's, a much sort of calmer, more reasonable way of approaching.
Yeah. You know the dynamics of your, within a personal relationship, the person that knows you the best is normally the person that you're in a personal and an intimate relationship with. They know the buttons to kind of press. They know your kind of habits and those kind of things. What I think we should explore is something that would have worked if we backtest it through the previous times. And your twin sister's approach, where it's kind of like, right, sitting down, having a conversation, knowing what you know about yourself and, let's say, the relationships where this has caused an issue, where you've kind of got angry and lost the plot. Do you think if you were that kind of, let's say, moderate, calm, composed, not backing down, but just using, let's say, very kind of clear communication as the way to resolve something rather than raising your voice, that actually it would have worked out better for you if you kind of look backwards at the times where you did lose the plot?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think if I could, but a lot of, I think when I get angry like that, it's because I'm almost like, I can't be bothered having this, I shouldn't even be having to have this conversation.
Okay.
You know? So it's quite often because I'm not in a position to even, you know, I'm just like, why are we even having to speak about this? Because nothing's happened, or, you know, whatever it is. So I absolutely see how it could, but, you know, quite often I'm probably not in a place where I would have a conversation or would want to. So it would need to be later, or...
Yeah. So what we need to do is we need to, when the toothpaste is already out of the tube, it's too late. So what we need is a resource state that means that when you're starting to lose the plot, actually it steers you in the direction of, rather than frustration and impatience, which then triggers the anger, which then justifies the raised voices and the, you know, hurtful words, actually something a bit more kind of resourceful and useful for you. And sometimes it's good to give it, you know, a word or a name. And I don't think your twin sister is the perfect thing, but it might get us closer to it. How would you describe your sister when she's in a similar situation, being treated unfair, or people aren't listening, or she's feeling confined? What quality would you say that she has to resolve it in the way that she does?
It's probably just the quality to remain calm, you know, to not explode. But then, as we were growing up, that probably wasn't the same. But then my mum was very, you know, I mean, I was one of four, and my mum was very good at dealing with all four of us being little buggers at times. And she had a very, you know, my mum and dad were kind of chalk and cheese, and not to paint a bad picture of my dad, because he's amazing, but he rightfully lost the plot with us at various times because he had four kids, all within a 4-year age gap, causing all sorts of bloody problems. So but mum was definitely just calmer, but then she was much softer, and she was a bit of a walkover as well, you know. So you know, so it's kind of, I can see the approach that would work, but maybe there's a bit of a, well, it worked, but actually you kind of...
The truth is you don't buy into that, because you use justification for your father and said quite rightfully, you know, and that you've described both your sister and your mother as a bit too soft. So you would reject that in its current form. And what we've got here is we've now got a spectrum. How your mum is and your twin sister is, you could see how you would lose the downside of all of the fallout, but you can't really see how it would rectify or resolve the very cause of it. So that doesn't work for you. And equally, you know that the status quo also doesn't work for you, because it's not really making it any fairer, not making it less confining. What I get a sense of is that it throws a spanner in the works of what would be a better relationship if you didn't lose your temper as frequently as you did, however frequently that is. So either end of the spectrum isn't right. What we're looking for is a new resource state. And it might be that what that is kind of very clear, very calm, very composed, but instead of being aggressive, which is normally a representation of losing control, it might be, let's say, determined or tenacious, or it's kind of like we're communicating about this in such a way. For example, there's certain action heroes that they become very clear but without needing to raise their voice. In fact, if they raise their voice, they would actually lose some of their strength. So if you think of a Liam Neeson, I don't think you see him shouting, or a Denzel Washington. Again, they're very kind of, but there is that kind of cool, calm composure that still says, all right, this isn't okay, but without needing to reach the point of volatility and explosion. Who is and I'm looking for a male role model here that has that quality, that they wouldn't take any shit, but equally they're not going to lose their cool. Like, who is that for you?
I don't really know. I mean, my brother's pretty good at that, but he does lose his shit with his kids as well. So I don't really know from a male role model point of view.
If you've ever blasted synth beats from your boombox or burned CDs for your besties, this one's for you. As people get older, much like their music tastes, their health needs change. AG1 is the simple daily health drink designed to deliver over 75 essential daily nutrients and pre- and probiotics to support energy, digestion, and mood, so you can make the most out of every decade and dance break. Learn more at drinkag1.com.
Do you hear that? Sounds like breakfast is ready. Because Quaker's coming in hot with morning nutrition. 100% whole grain oats and a good source of fiber to fuel the rhythm of your morning and kickstart your day. And that sounds absolutely delicious. Fuel to start whatever's next. Quaker, official sponsor of FIFA World Cup 26.
There's not really, I don't know. I couldn't really think, grandfather-wise, I didn't know one because he was passed before I was born. Another one didn't know well. They lived down in Wales. We were up in Scotland.
Mm-hmm.
Uncles and stuff, but I suppose it runs in the family. Everyone's probably quite, they're great role models, but actually when the push comes to shove, they can, most of the guys in my family probably can lose their temper. Certainly in kind of situation.
A lot of your unconscious role models will be that actually people can be nice, good people, but actually that if it reaches breaking point, losing the plot is what you saw throughout your childhood, and therefore it became acceptable for you, even if it's not, let's say, useful in the current context. Is there a role model that isn't necessarily someone that but could even be? And I'll share this anecdote with you. There was a guy I worked with, and he'd never been in a relationship that he actively kind of pursued, and he there was no thought of discernment that actually if he started dating, it was inevitable that he would end up marrying them, if that makes sense. So I asked him the question, is like, has there ever been a time in your life when you've kind of chosen someone, they weren't quite right for you? He couldn't think of anyone. So I said, can you think of someone that would have no qualms at all about, speaking to someone and would have no fear of rejection? And he was like, okay, James Bond. That was his kind of like archetypal person, that he's not going to be whimpering away if a woman rejects him, if that makes sense. That was his role model. Could you think of a role model that could even be fictional, that for you is the quality that I'm looking for here, rather than how well you know them, that actually they would deal with and I'll introduce this just because there's a slight resemblance there, but I don't know if you've seen like the Tom Hardy character in kind of Mobland, but he's got like a very kind of like slow, measured voice. It makes it absolutely clear that certain things are unacceptable, but he doesn't yell and shout and scream to kind of get to that point. I'm just thinking, like, is someone coming up for you that would kind of connect to that quality?
I can't really think, to be honest. I mean, I think that's the quality that I would love to, just that remain calm, but sort of deal with what's around you in that sort of authoritative way, but not losing it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I don't know. I can't really think specifically. It's the kind of thing that I'll probably come to me later and think, oh, do you know what, that's the,
Yeah. Well,
not...
what we'll have is we'll have a broad resource start, because what I've got a sense here is cool, calm, but uncompromising. The phrase that is most emotive for you that does not appeal is the walkover phrase. So you can't be seen or feel like you're being weak. And you've got a belief system that probably came from the dominant male role model, which was your father, which is raising your voice as a representation of dominance and strength. Actually, the clue is losing the plot. That's the point where you've lost control, not where you've gained control. So we need the resource state to be very, very kind of confident and uncompromising, no sign of weakness. And at the moment, it's a last resort that actually doesn't give you any leverage or doesn't give you any more options. It reduces all of your options. And I have a feeling, and correct me if I'm wrong, that actually because you've lost the plot, that's actually been used to justify the behavior of other people that you thought was unfair all along. So actually it's counterproductive to lose the plot, because not only do you not get the outcome that you're looking for, but it's used as leverage to say, look, you're unreasonable, you're the problem here, and therefore nothing changes. So what we've got is we've got a strategy here that has loads of negative fallout and isn't even working very well. So it's like the CD player that doesn't even play, or the VHS tape that doesn't even play the movie. It's not even the best option. It's like a pretty bad option that doesn't even do any of those things.
Yeah. And I think as well, I suppose just thinking about sort of role models and stuff, but actually on the opposite of that, like one thing that I hate is bullies. I hate, and and that maybe comes back to the kid that poured the coke on my head and stuff. But actually, when I'm behaving the way that I'm behaving, it isn't a bullying. You become a bully, I suppose, because you're shouting.
He's using physical presence and kind of volume as a form of dominance to coerce. That's effectively the definition of a bully. It's using power dynamics to get your outcome at the expense of someone else's. So the fact that you hate bullies and you can make that connection within yourself, that's powerful. We can use that as leverage. What we now need is something that works better. And I think we've got the resource state, which is this cool, calm, confident, yet uncompromising. I think that's the resource state. But we actually need something that is going to lead to recourse. And the whole point of you having the element of losing the plot is an attempt to either manage or enforce boundaries. That's the actual function behind it. Something is unfair, you're trying to make it fair. Your freedom is being restricted, you're trying to expand it and give yourself. It's all about boundary control. Mm-hmm. There is a theory that actually the best way of managing boundaries is this acronym called, it's almost like the 3 C's. So it's kind of like communication, chances, and then consequences. So I think the reason why you're going down this pathway is the lack of a better option. That actually, if you've got a better option, why would you use a thing that doesn't even work how you want it anyway? So we have to kind of, and if you've got the combination of both, so a highly resourceful state and a more effective strategy, then there's no need to lose your cool, because actually you've got a better strategy anyway. So in essence, this 3C model is that you communicate clearly what your expectations is and what's okay and what isn't okay. So, and that's ideally done outside of any conflict. It's kind of put on the table nice and early. So if when your daughter was younger, you expect her to kind of clear up her plates afterwards, communicating that before there's a plate on the surface is better than when there is a plate on the surface, if that makes sense. Yeah. And if it's in a personal relationship and you say, look, every now and then I want time with my friends, not because I don't love you, but because I just need time for myself. It's really important. You've probably heard about mental health issues with men hanging out with other guys. Like, it's an important part of just kind of like this, like, but it's said not at the point where that's something that you want or there's an issue, but it's kind of said early. So communication early is quite helpful in that consequence, in that situation. The next is chances. So if it's clearly communicated and there is an agreement of and a great phrase is, do you think this is fair? Does this sound reasonable? But you get the agreement before there's ever the issue. That's quite important. If you just communicate it, but people are like, I'm not agreeing to that. It doesn't really work. But the communication, you have to be on the same page to begin with. Then if it's been communicated, and then let's say that there is an element of a lack of fairness, but you've kind of agreed what the rules are, and now it's not going ahead in the way that you've kind of communicated. Well, at that point, an internal rule, which is where a lot of anger comes from, when a rule or an agreement is broken, is that element of, right, okay, I'm getting angry now, this isn't okay. At that point, it gives you the option of either a chance or a consequence. Now, it might be that actually that is a great time to communicate it, but it isn't necessary that you communicate it at this particular point. If you know that it's heading towards that part of you're getting riled up, and you'll know what the clues are better than anyone else. It might be that you're breathing, or you're pacing, or you're fidgeting, or you keep checking something. There'll be some clues that you're aware of that it's heading towards losing the plot before you've lost the plot. Then it's a case of, okay, you've got options there. If the toothpaste is already coming out of the tube, that's not the ideal time for issuing consequences, ultimatums, or anything like that. It might be the ideal time for you to allow yourself, let's say, space, if that makes sense, because there will be a historical element. Obviously, this gets better and better over time, because once you're on the same page about stuff, and once people trust that you're never going to raise your voice and kind of lose your cool, then at that point, conversations get easier anyway. Yeah. But in the beginning time, having that kind of element of, okay, right, I need to clear my head, I need some kind of time. What would work for you, by the way, in terms of something that actually would work? And again, let's back test it with previous dynamics, that actually, if you would have done that, it would have avoided the line being crossed where you actually got into that anger mode because you could catch it early enough. Would that be time by yourself, going for a walk? What would have worked?
I think it probably is. It's probably taking a bit of a time out. I mean, the one thing that really helps me get out of, so if I've lost the plot, so I've gone there and I've had the rage and I'm still pissed off, or I'm in a huff, or whatever it is, the one thing that almost instantly will get me out of it is something funny. If I can decide, and quite often if I'm in a bit of a rage like that, I'll go off and I don't know, start doing housework or something, but you're sort of, and it's like I need to do something. But the one thing that will snap me out of it is, if I just go and sit down and like stick on something, but you can't conjure something funny all the time, but you maybe just, look at your phone and a funny, whatever pops up. If I do a bit of a laugh, then it's like I can just forget about it and move on, and it's much easier for me to then I'm not kind of in that state.
Yeah. So that would definitely interrupt your pattern. Can it be engineered is my key question.
And I probably not, but I think the space thing, it can be, but it's maybe, even if I go, so let's say there's about to be a thing and I go off and take the dog for a walk or something, if I'm sort of already a bit annoyed and then it's just, I'm playing it in my head, I might come back and still be, a bit grumpy or whatever, and likely to.
Yeah. So the playing in your head would probably be done in a particular way. So when you're playing in your head, are you rehearsing arguments or kind of phrases, or thinking of what's happening that shouldn't be happening?
Yeah, more of that. Thinking of how unfair it is and
unfair. Okay.
Happening, basically.
Yeah. And is that typically a movie, or is that in a dialogue? Because and it can be a combination of both, but some people can be thinking about the thing and saying like, that's not right, this isn't okay.
Probably thinking about it rather than visualizing it, I suppose.
Yeah. So it's more in a dialogue.
Well,
okay. So if we think of these historical things, and if we look at it in the sense that if there was an element of these things that clearly you feel are unfair, okay, how many of them do you think would have been communicated beforehand, which is why it feels unfair, that actually you thought you were on the same page about something, and that's what makes it unfair, is that the communication is then being rejected at some level?
Probably a lot of them, certainly within relationships that I've been in, it's kind of that repetitive cycle of the same sort of issue. And, when everyone's clear and you're able to have a conversation about it, it's easy to sort of say, well, let's put this in place and let's do that. But ultimately, it eventually always comes down to something's brought up or whatever it is. There's a reaction that I don't like, that I then react to, that maybe goes backwards and forwards a few times to then, but it is a repetitive thing. It's probably frustration that here we are dealing with the same bloody thing again.
Yeah, so it's the kind of history repeating, and the even communication and agreement hasn't resolved this, and therefore what you've got the unfairness comes from, you thought there's an agreement on boundary, and that boundary is being violated or contradicted, and that's the cause. So effectively, in terms of the chances and consequences, effectively what it comes down to, and it doesn't need aggression to do this, is to say, right, okay, and it doesn't even have to be in that moment, it can be the following day, and that is a conversation that says, I thought we were on the same page, I thought we had this agreement, and yet when it came down to actually it linking to something, suddenly it was an issue. And because of that, therefore, there is a consequence. Now, a consequence within a relationship, the nuclear button is always ending the relationship. And that is a nuclear button, because once it's ended, it's gone. And there are some people that's the consequence, but it reaches that. The middle ground is the compromise element, and to say, right, okay,
study and play come together on a Windows 11 PC. And for a limited time, college students get the best of both worlds. Get the Unreal College Deal. Everything you need to study and play with select Windows 11 PCs. Eligible students get a year of Microsoft 365 Premium and a year of Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with a custom color Xbox wireless controller. Learn more at windows.com/student offer. While supplies last. Ends June 30th. Terms at aka.ms/collegepc.
When you need to build up your team to handle the growing chaos at work, use Indeed Sponsored Jobs. It gives your job post the boost it needs to be seen and helps reach people with the right skills, certifications, and more. Spend less time searching and more time actually interviewing candidates who check all your boxes. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. That's Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need a hiring hero? This is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs.
I thought we communicated it, this thing's happening, but where do we go from here, and then reach a new agreement? Now, if it's impossible to kind of make agreements, you're making agreements for them and it's kind of reciprocal, then actually it might not be a viable relationship, in which case, ending the relationship is probably the sensible thing to do, because otherwise you're settling for a relationship where your needs or wishes aren't really respected, even if you're willing to kind of respect the equivalent the other way around. Nobody wants to be in a parasitic kind of relationship where their needs are more important than your own. But equally, that quite often isn't always the case. And actually, if there can be some kind of compromise or resolution to that, my question to you, though, is that if we had this kind of composed, confident, calm, yet uncompromising tone throughout, would that increase or decrease the likelihood of finding some kind of resolution that doesn't require being a walkover or pressing the nuclear button and just ending the relationship? Like, does that seem more likely for you if you can keep that cool, calm, composed demeanor?
Yeah, certainly in the situation that I'm currently in, there's absolutely a compromise that, I think a lot of the things that cause me to lose my temper are things that can't be controlled or are very difficult for the other person to control. And that's it, so I'm sort of reacting to stuff that they're not meaning to either. Like in the cool light of day, once we've had that initial conversation stuff, everything's generally fine. But it's that initial, I've got this, well, why can't I just do this without being questions or without being, but I need to compromise to the point where it's like, well, I just need to make this other person feel better about what I'm doing for them to then just be quite happy for me. It's not that they don't want me to do it. They just have a bit of a block themselves, and their instant thing is fear and that something bad's going to happen or whatever it is. And that pisses me off because I'm just like, I just want to go and do whatever it is I want to do. But that's not how that person actually thinks about what I'm doing. It's just their instant reaction is that one of fear and anxiety and whatever.
Yeah. And actually, if that's the underlying motive for them to kind of, they're feeling afraid, perhaps linked to a fear and insecurity, a worry, a concern, and your reaction is to get annoyed or frustrated by that, actually what you've got here is the petrol on the flames element, because actually what they want at that point is a form of reassurance. And what you're doing is creating more distance, which is going to increase their level of insecurity, which then is going to increase your level of frustration because they're not seeing it the way that you're seeing it. And then it reaches that point of explosion. And then at that point, they're feeling probably not just, let's say kind of anxious, but upset at that point because of what's happened. So what we could say is that another useful resource state would be not to be understood, which is where I think a lot of your frustration is coming from, but to understand.
Mm-hmm.
And it might be that this actually avoids a lot of the very trigger that is causing your frustration. And rather than, because a lot of people will get into this dynamic of, but you don't see it the way I'm seeing it, like you don't get where I'm coming from. But actually, if the goal from your perspective is that you can detect that there is some kind of conflict there, then even though you might have this belief that, well, I shouldn't have to do this, they should already know it. The should is just a value judgment. They are perceiving it in that particular way. And therefore, can you get to a place where you can see it the way that they see it? And if you can, actually, rather than disconnect, you're going to get connection. And in that connection, what you might find is that that's all the reassurance that was actually needed. It's kind of like, okay, and then it might be that you say, look, I appreciate that you're worried that this might happen or this might happen. Actually, it's not really about that. And I want you to trust that actually this, and I won't let you down. And if the goal is reassurance, and there's just that phrase, I won't let you down, that actually then means that there's a win-win, because now if trust is given and that trust is rewarded through actual behavioral, their fear was unfounded, actually it builds more confidence the next time a similar situation is happening. But you're more likely to get that outcome with a cool, calm, composed demeanor than raising your voice and getting frustrated with the very thing, because actually that could lead to a lose-lose outcome. They feel upset, and actually you end up not doing whatever the thing is that you wanted to do anyway, but then resenting your partner for then vetoing the very thing that you wanted to do. That's the worst possible kind of outcome of both.
Yeah.
There is a different, kind of route there, and nothing's perfect. You're not going to get exactly what you want 100% of the time. Nobody can. But I think the key thing here is the quality of your life better if you're able to have less moments of kind of losing the plot and more moments of composed communication where you seek understanding and their perspective first. And then what you'll find is that if by maintaining that resource state, but equally not being a walkover, making sure your boundaries are understood and clear, that gives you the reward to make it a self-perpetuating system, so you don't go back to that. Your brain is seeking for, right, there's an element of respect and trust and confidence and all of these things, but it's kind of like, if that isn't done, losing the plot or getting angry feels justified because of those ingredients, and therefore it's not really rewarding, but it's emotive, and a lot of neural pathways get built not because of pleasure but emotional intensity, and anger is a particularly intense emotion, if that makes sense. So what I think we do in this hypnosis session is we will have three components to it. One is an element of regressing back, and I'm just going to keep it really broad and say a childhood memory. And that childhood memory could be your father yelling at you with the broken petrol cap. It could be the kid pouring Coke on your head. It could be a brother, pushing you to breaking point. Doesn't really matter what it is. You at your current age observing, it's kind of like, oh yeah, I see where this came from. It came from a child learning to stick up for yourself. That's quite honorable and valid and completely rational. There's nothing wrong at all for that. But then we want to witness how that has been in the more recent past of what has that strategy that worked as a child actually cost you in terms of personal relationships as an adult. And on the balance of things, is it a good strategy to keep? And if it is, keep it. If it isn't, what do we replace it with? And what we replace it with is going to be an element of, okay, what if you were able to be cool, calm, composed, yet uncompromising, no walkover at all, but equally you're not going to, explode like a volcano, like this middle ground of you can sit with the frustration and not be affected by it, and then use that communication either in the moment or perhaps the following day. It doesn't all have to be done in that moment. And does that lead to more positive outcomes retrospectively? And then if it does, what does that look like in your future? And we call this future pacing, where you get to experience almost test driving this version of you, and you'll know the triggers. But let's think of the most common one, because quite often there's a Pareto principle here where a lot of the triggers are going to be like 2 or 3 things. What would be a predictable thing for you that if it happened like 3 weeks from now, unless something changes, that would probably get you losing the plot?
It would be me basically saying that I'd been invited to some sort of night out or something, and there's maybe going to be females there, and rather than just, go and have a nice time, it'll be loads of questions about who's going and who's this, and and just lots of problems lots of negativity put in front of me, rather than just, that sounds nice, go and have a nice time. That's my big, I'm very much, that's how I respond to anything that someone's doing. I'm just like, that sounds great. If you're going to enjoy it, go and enjoy it. But I generally get a lot of negativity that almost makes you feel like you can't then go and enjoy whatever it was you were doing. But there would be, certain things would be okay. But if there's a mix of, probably, if it's a night out, so alcohol's involved or whatever, and, there's going to be females around, that's where a lot of, I suppose, the insecurities come from on the other side. And that's been in various relationships that I've been in. It's, it's not just, it's over years that I've kind of probably had that. So that's the thing that I'll react badly to, because I'm just like, I've never done anything, I don't deserve that. But
yeah. So your lens that you're looking at it is kind of like you're being unfairly judged or held under suspicion for something that you haven't done, wouldn't do. Okay. And that leads to the frustration, which can boil over to anger.
Yeah.
But equally the perspective of current partner, previous partners might be not that there is a fear that you're going to do something that, would represent a betrayal or infidelity, but we might be able to give it a more empowering meaning so that you actually feel complimented. I've worked with guys, for example, they'll get angry if someone's looking at their partner when they're out in public. They feel like really territorial. But there is a way of looking at that where it's a compliment. They're with an attractive partner, if that makes sense. The meaning itself is going to be inextricably linked to the emotion. If you could get to a point where, rather than this feeling that you're being unfairly judged and held under suspicion, could be given a a complementary lens in which kind of like, oh, okay, right, I see where you're coming from here, and it would lead to reassurance. What would that lens be from your perspective?
I don't really know, because I suppose I'm exactly what you've just described. Not the territorial one, the one that if people are looking, I'm like, yeah, because So and I don't get jealous. I don't get don't have any sort of trust or jealousy concerns at all. So I just find it really hard when there's anything like that to find anything complimentary about it, because I just don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, as
so it might be, and it doesn't matter if it's true or not. It's just whether it's useful or not. That actually, if you were in a relationship where your partner could not care less at what you did, it probably means there's not a lot of value to that relationship. If you've got a watch that cost £1, you don't care if you lose it, if that makes sense. If you've got something very valuable, you want to make sure it doesn't get damaged, it doesn't get lost. There could be a lens that you could say, right, the reason why there is this fear is because they've got something precious and valuable, and it might not be that you're the problem. It's that there might be a fear that other people, other women in that same environment, might have an agenda with you. Now, whether that's true or not doesn't matter. My question is, can you get to a place where that could be a lens in which to look for, that actually, if you're invited out, actually you could say, oh, okay, it's coming from that place because you've got something valuable, rather than I'm being suspected. Could we get to that place?
I think so. I think, I'm very open to always trying to reframe perspectives and understand that everyone has a different perspective on something. So certainly in the, when you're in a completely calm state, that's easy to say, in an angry state, not so much. Yeah, absolutely. I could, it would be good to try and work on reframing some of these things. Because that's, at the end of the day, it's in my mind. I've framed it as, well, I suppose what I frame jealousy and insecurity as is someone that doesn't trust me, which means that they think very little of me, because I'm the kind of person that would go, and that's probably how I see it. And because I'm a very trusting person, I see that as the ultimate, like, let them, vote of confidence, really. Not that you don't care about them, but that actually, I trust you so much, you could go and do anything and I wouldn't question it because I believe in you, kind of thing, and so I'm at one end of the scale, and I understand that end is maybe quite rare as well, but when
it's just a perspective, but clearly, let's say current or previous partners haven't necessarily held that. Otherwise, there wouldn't be the very conflict that you're talking about. But and it might be that there is, some kind of suspicion. Okay, that's possible. This is all about not what's true, but what's useful to deal with the anger. So what we'll do in the future pacing is two things. One, if you know that being invited out is likely to lead to this, part of the future pacing is going to be you observing yourself, communicating it before there's any invitation, to kind of set it out, and really from a place when there's no stakes involved. You're not missing out on anything, just to kind of have the communication, really see it from their perspective. Maybe even invite them along as well, to kind of mitigate that. But that element of seeing it from their side, and then actually in the moment having it through the lens of, could this be empowering or positive, or at least understood in a way, rather than assuming that it means you're being judged, you're not being trusted, and those kind of things, which probably is leading to the feeling of unfairness. Because I think part of the hypocrisy ingredient to your anger is an element of, but I wouldn't do this if it was the other way around. If you were invited out with your friends, I'd say, hey, have a good night, enjoy yourself, and you're not doing this to me. This is not fair. Okay, that could be one of the key ingredients. Yeah. But you're not them and they're not you. And therefore it's the understanding that can actually be a big ingredient to kind of get to that cool, calm, composed state, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Perfect. Take a deep breath in. And as you breathe in that resourceful feeling of calm and relaxation. And as you exhale, just allow your eyelids to close. That's it. And as they close, just feel your body start to relax. Feel a sense of release. Breathing in relaxation and exhaling tension. Each breath enables you to drift deeper and deeper relaxed. That's it. In fact, the deeper you breathe, the more relaxed you feel. And the more relaxed you feel, the deeper you breathe. A wonderful cycle of ever-increasing relaxation. As your body relaxes, your imagination awakens. And I want you to think back to a time when you were completely relaxed, calm, and confident. The kind of setting where nothing could faze you. That even if someone tried their very hardest to rile you, to push your buttons, they just couldn't. Maybe it was a time when you were in nature. A memory of a holiday. A time when you felt immune to provocation. And just connect with that place. Link back to that memory. Breathe the way you were breathing. That's it. And very soon I'm going to count down from 5 to 1. And I want you to imagine drifting off into a dream-like sleep. And in that dream, we're going to go back to memories of where you learned something useful then, not so useful now. 5, drifting off, eyelids getting heavier. 4, jaw starting to loosen. Shoulders and arms start to relax. That's it. 3. Feel your internal organs, your heart, your lungs, your stomach relaxing now. 2. Legs, limp, loose, relaxed. And 1, down to your feet. And just imagine drifting off now, deeper and deeper relaxed. And in this dream, I want you to imagine a bubble that can float up and take you backwards and forwards in time. Imagine climbing into the bubble in this dream within a dream. And let's float back to a childhood memory. Not to relive it, just to observe it. Feel yourself in the bubble, seeing everything as it was. You are invisible to anyone in the memory. You can see them. They can't see you. And I want you to see a child. A child that learned that raising their voice, sticking up for themselves, was necessary or useful for that time in your life. Maybe there was a time when you were accused of something that you didn't do intentionally. Or maybe someone was just trying to push your buttons, to see what you would tolerate and what you wouldn't. And just observe. I want you to see there was a time where raising your voice, where being more physical, more dominant, made sense. That a seed was planted from what you saw from those around you. A solution to the problem of fairness. But what if that was never the only option? It was simply one tool that worked in one context, but doesn't really work in others. A hammer might be good to nail wood together, but you wouldn't use a hammer to saw down a tree. And I want you to observe. Observe why you do what you do. You learnt it, you were rewarded by it. And in a particular context, it made sense. But I want you to float up from that bubble and visit a relationship with someone that mattered. Maybe a partner, maybe a child. And I want you to see, through that bubble, looking back at that memory, see yourself getting to that place where that switch is flipped, where you lose the plot, where you cross a line. And I want you to see memory after memory of the damage, the pain, the frustration it causes. I want you to see the bridges you burned, the relationships that could never quite get back to how they were before. That when certain people saw a side of you they'd never seen before, things were never quite the same again. Allow this bubble to reveal these memories to you. Maybe it's linked to regret, pain, sorrow or sadness, or something else. Allow yourself to feel whatever you feel. No judgment, just an observer. Real memories, real moments. And I want you to see a childlike quality in those versions of you. The same quality you saw in you as a child. See that same pattern being played. And I want you to get a sense that knowing what you now know, if you could do something different, more useful, if your unconscious wants to change one tool for another, one option for another, let me know by nodding your head. But before we leave these memories, I don't want you to just see a child in an adult's body. I want you to see a bully. Someone using the loudness of their voice. Someone using their physical size to dominate, to utilize those unfair power dynamics. And I wonder if you can reach a point where it feels like enough is enough. You don't want that anymore. And if you can reach that place, let me know by nodding your head. That's it. And let's rewind these memories, or maybe just one. And I want you to see a version of you with a different option. I want you to see that losing the plot is no different from losing control. And when you lose control, you lose your influence too. So as you rewind that memory, I want you to visit a time in your life where you were at your most calm, composed, and yet uncompromising. And maybe it wasn't personal, maybe it was work related. You weren't happy with something. Something was unfair. You didn't just tolerate it, you spoke up. You communicated. You made it crystal clear why you felt the way that you felt. And maybe you even tried to understand the different perspective. But I want you to find a memory where you communicated your concerns, the unfairness, the injustice, in a cool, calm, composed, yet uncompromising way. And when you can find something like that, let me know by nodding your head. That's it. And I want you to float into that memory. Feel how you were breathing when you said what needed to be said. Composed, calm, confident and clearly. You were no walkover, and yet you did not raise your voice. You did not lose control. In fact, you felt more in control. You were deliberate, intentional. And I want you to feel how good this feeling feels. I want you to take that feeling, return to the bubble, and see how you look, your mannerisms, your facial expression, your body language, when you are cool, calm, composed, and yet uncompromising. And I want you to take just one of those memories and see that version of you handling it in a different way, because that was the state you were in. I want you to see that nothing can rile you. You become very aware. Maybe there's a double standard, hypocrisy. Maybe there's a feeling that you're being unfairly treated or confined. But see the way that you're handling it. Calm, composed, uncompromising, and yet deeply understanding. This version of you seeks to understand before you become understood. a real desire to see it from their perspective. And if that's valid, you acknowledge it. And if there is no perspective, then you know they are being unreasonable. And then you have the power to act accordingly, and still with no need for a raised voice or a loss of control. And I want you to imagine each of those memories of the past where you did lose the plot. Start to imagine this new version of you handling the same situation in this more measured, deliberate, calm way. Not a walkover, but not losing the very essence of who you are. No tantrums. And if you could imagine these memories where you're being more of that calm, composed, yet uncompromising version of you, let me know by nodding your head. And if by handling things that way, they lead to more of the very outcome that you were seeking, more fairness, more understanding, more connection, let me know by nodding your head. And just allow this thought, this resource to ripple through the past and the future. And I wonder if your unconscious is willing to make this your default. I want you to get a sense that there is many areas of your life that you would not raise your voice. You would not lose control, even if your buttons were pushed. Those neural pathways already exist. But how's it fair that the people that are closest to you, that care for you more, receive this out of control version of you more than anyone else? The irony would be, the unfairness causes the anger, but the anger itself is unfair. And the more your brain updates an alternative option, a new choice, that you can still communicate your perspective. You can seek to resolve a feeling of unfairness or injustice without the need to lose your temper. The more that becomes the initial and in fact only way of handling those situations. And if anger starts to bubble up, I want you to think of two things that become compulsions. One, to take yourself out of that situation, to allow things to settle down. But there'll be a part of your brain that is looking for something silly, humorous, funny, to just have the very scaffolding of anger to come crashing down instantly. But the more you find that place of calm, composed, clear communication, and perhaps your language is slower and clearer than it even normally would be, I want you to observe how you look more in control, not less in control. More influential, not not less influential. You look stronger, not weaker. The person that loses control and the person that is walked all over are both weak. Strength is in the middle. Clarity as to your needs and your boundaries, but zero tolerance to bully anyone else to secure it. If your unconscious is happy to accept these new suggestions as a way that gives you more of the life that you want and respects the people closest to you, let me know by nodding your head. And one final visit in that bubble is the future. I want you to imagine yourself a few weeks from now. I want you to see yourself having a conversation before one is necessary. You know those historical areas that can lead to conflict. And see yourself not in a demanding or agitated way, but a cool, calm, composed way, having a reasonable conversation about what's important to you and what's important to someone that matters to you. And I want you to see yourself with a whole new level of tenacity at seeking true understanding, really seeing it from their side. Not because you have to, not because you should, but because you want to. Because the more clearly you see things in the way that the people that matter most to you see things, the less the idea of fairness pops into your head, and it becomes more about reassuring genuine concerns based on all of the experiences that that individual experienced. Your unconscious pattern was anger that came from seeing older siblings and a parent raise their voice. Therefore, isn't it only natural that other people have their own unconscious patterns triggered by what they experienced in their past? As you understand, things make sense. You feel less confined, more understanding, and you seek to build bridges, not burn them. You seek to include rather than exclude. If your unconscious can now take you to a moment that would have been a cause of anger, but instead is handled differently now, then visit that memory that is yet to happen and see things as they would be now, with these new beliefs, perceptions, and ways of resolving different points of view. That's it. And if this seems a much more effective way, useful way, powerful way of resolving things, let me know by nodding your head. That's it. And then step into that future version of you. And I want you to see that even if they try to push your buttons, this new version of you feels like those buttons just don't work anymore. I want you to think of all the things that have triggered you in the past. A facial expression, a tonality, a mannerism, a closed door, anything at all, and see that when you feel this way, none of those things make you feel frustrated or angry. They make you curious and empathetic, seeking an even deeper level of understanding. Dial it up, make it the worst it could ever be. And if you feel that even under those circumstances, you would not lose the plot, let me know by nodding your head. That's it. Allow yourself back in that bubble and allow the bubble to float all the way back to that lovely memory. And then from that lovely memory, it's time to float back to the present, taking all of these changes with you. Take a deep breath in through your nose and out through your nose. Just wiggle your fingers and wiggle your toes, connect and calibrate into the here and the now. As I now count from 1 to 10 to awaken you. Starting to count. 1, 2, 3, waking up. 4, 5, 6, more alert. 7, 8, open your eyes, open your eyes. 9, 10, wide awake, wide awake, wide awake. Thank you so much for joining me on today's episode of The Hypnotist. If you've enjoyed this episode or got some value from it, please give it a 5-star rating and review. And maybe you know someone that would also benefit from this particular episode, in which case share the episode with them so they can also get the benefit too. And if you would like to listen to this episode where it's just the hypnosis, so no intro, no outro, no explanation, just the hypnosis and completely ad-free, there will be a link in the description where you can subscribe at a very low cost and only get access to the hypnosis. So if that's of interest, please check that out. Thank you again for being a regular listener of The Hypnotist, and I'll see you again soon for more.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile with a message for everyone paying big wireless way too much. Please, for the love of everything good in this world, stop. With Mint, you can get premium wireless for just $15 a month. Of course, if you enjoy overpaying, no judgments, but that's weird. Okay, one judgment. Anyway, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
Struggling with weight loss? Prolon's 5-day fasting mimicking diet is a clinically developed nutrition program designed to promote fat loss while protecting lean body mass. Developed at USC's Longevity Institute, it assists the body in entering a fasting-like state that helps reset metabolism and target visceral fat. In just 5 days, Prolon offers a science-backed approach to weight loss without extreme restriction or guesswork. Get 15% off plus a $40 bonus gift when you subscribe at prolonlife.com/now.